You have less time than you think. Not years, not months. Researchers who study stroke recovery have found that the average person waits over 3 hours after their first warning sign before they even mention it to another human being. And by the time paramedics arrive, a significant chunk of the brain tissue that could have been saved is already gone. 3 hours. That's not the stroke. That's the silence before it. And that silence is the most dangerous part of this entire disease because it's the part nobody talks about. This video isn't about the stroke itself. You've seen those videos. The face drooping, the arm collapsing, the slurred sentence caught mid-word. That's the emergency. That's the moment everyone already recognizes, at least in theory. What almost nobody recognizes is the window before that moment. The hours, sometimes the full day, when your brain is already sending distress signals, quietly, in a language most people have never been taught to read. That's what we're covering here, the pre-warning phase, the part of the timeline where a stroke is still preventable, or at least still treatable with almost no lasting damage, if you catch it. And here's the myth we need to kill before we go any further. Most people think stroke symptoms are big and obvious, dramatic, unmistakable. They're not. The symptoms that show up beforehand are often small, forgettable, easy to explain away. That's exactly why they work as warnings nobody heeds. A warning system only fails when it's too quiet to notice, and your brain's warning system is quiet by design. So why is the brain even wired this way? Why does it break down so fast when something as simple as blood flow gets interrupted? Think of your brain less like an organ and more like a city that runs entirely on a single, uninterruptible power grid. Every neighborhood, memory, movement, speech, vision is a separate district wired to that same grid, and none of them store their own backup power. A muscle can survive on stored fuel for a while if circulation drops. Skin can survive on almost nothing, but brain tissue has no reserve tank. The instant a blood vessel narrows or blocks, the district it feeds starts losing power immediately, not in hours, in minutes. Cells begin dying at a rate of roughly 2 million per minute during a full blockage. That's the piece most people never internalize. The brain doesn't have a grace period. It has a countdown. And the flickers you sometimes feel beforehand, the dimming lights before the blackout, those are the pre-warning signs we're about to walk through. They're not random. They're your power grid telling you a district is about to go dark. Here's the first one, and it's one you've almost certainly experienced and dismissed without a second thought. Picture this. You're brushing your teeth, leaning toward the mirror, half awake, running through your morning on autopilot. And for a second, just a second, one side of your mouth doesn't quite move right when you spit. Or you catch your reflection and something about your smile looks slightly off, slightly uneven, like a photo that's a fraction of a degree crooked. You blink. You look again. It's gone. Normal. You chalk it up to being tired, to sleeping on your face wrong, to nothing at all, and you move on with your day. Here's what actually just happened. That flicker wasn't nothing. It was a district in your power grid losing signal for a moment and then getting it back. A brief interruption in blood flow that resolved on its own before you even finished brushing. Doctors call these events fleeting for a reason. They're built to be dismissed. They last seconds, sometimes less than a minute, and they leave zero trace behind. No pain, no follow-up symptom. Nothing to point to later and say, that was it. But a brief, self-correcting flicker like this is one of the strongest predictors that a much larger blockage is forming nearby. And in a meaningful percentage of cases, the full event follows within 48 hours, not years later. 2 days. The mere moment isn't a glitch, it's a preview. Now, before we get into the rest of these warning signs, the ones almost nobody's ever told about, hit subscribe. Later in this video, I'm building you a complete pre-stroke checklist, every sign in order of how urgently you should act on it. And you're going to want that saved somewhere you can find it fast, because speed is the entire game here. Because the mirror isn't the scariest part of this story. It's just the first flicker. What comes next is a warning sign so easy to mistake for something completely ordinary that most people don't even remember it happened until it's too late to matter. Imagine you are sitting at your desk or carrying a single heavy bag of groceries from the car to the kitchen. You reach out to set it down, and suddenly your arm feels like it is filled with wet cement. It is not pain. It is not a cramp. It is a profound, dead weight that materializes out of nowhere. Your grip loosens against your will. Maybe you drop your house keys, or the coffee mug slips just enough to spill. You shake your arm out. You massage your shoulder. You tell yourself you slept on it weirdly, pushed it too hard at the gym, or you are just getting older. 5 to 10 minutes later, the strength is completely back. The heaviness is entirely gone. You move on with your afternoon. That is the reassurance. It feels completely logical to blame everyday fatigue. Here is the terrifying reversal. Muscles do not randomly lose their structural connection to your brain simply because you slept awkwardly. That dead weight sensation is a localized power outage. Deep inside your brain's motor cortex, the highly sensitive district that strictly controls the mechanical movement of your arm and hand, blood flow just dropped below the minimum operating threshold. The neurons did not die, but they temporarily stopped firing. They went into forced standby mode to conserve oxygen. It is the neurological equivalent of a rolling brownout. When the microscopic clot shifts or the constricted vessel relaxes, the power surges back and your arm feels perfectly normal. But the blood vessel that supplies that vital motor district is severely compromised, and it just gave you a physical demonstration of what happens when the power stays off for good. Then there is the next sign. This one is completely invisible to anyone watching you, making it the easiest one to write off. Picture this. You are driving home from work. It is the exact same route you have taken 5 days a week for the last 6 years. You stop at a highly familiar intersection, look up at the street signs, and for about 30 agonizing seconds, you have absolutely no idea where you are. The street names look like a foreign language. The neighborhood landmarks feel utterly alien. A subtle wave of panic rises in your chest, but before it can fully register, the map in your head violently clicks back into place. You know exactly where to turn. You let out a deep breath, blame it on a stressful day at the office, highway hypnosis, or lack of good sleep, and you drive home. We socially normalize this feeling constantly. We laugh it off and call it brain fog. But true spatial disorientation, completely losing your deeply ingrained map of a familiar physical environment, is never just the harmless quirk of being tired. It is a sudden, critical failure in the brain's parietal lobe, the complex district responsible for spatial awareness, navigation, and physical orientation. When temporary microblockages momentarily starve this specific cortical region of oxygen, your internal GPS simply reboots. You do not pass out. You do not slur your words. But your brain briefly loses the ability to process where your physical body resides in the external world. It is a silent, flashing alarm bell ringing in an empty room, begging you to pay attention to the underlying pressure building in your system. I have sat across from hundreds of stroke survivors in my medical career, and almost every single one vividly remembered experiencing one of these exact flickers in the days or weeks prior. Every single one. They noticed the flicker, rationalized it away, and buried the memory. As a doctor, deeply realizing just how many people carry these desperate warnings in total silence is a remarkably heavy burden. It profoundly changes how you look at preventative medicine. Over the years, I realized catching these flickers is vital, but forcefully addressing the underlying cardiovascular pressure that causes them is the actual battle. I kept desperately wishing there was something tangible I could hand my patients, a practical daily resource for actively managing the stealthy fluctuations in their cardiovascular system. Specifically, those incredibly quiet afternoon blood pressure spikes, the ones happening right around 4 p.m., putting relentless, entirely invisible stress on delicate blood vessels day after day, ultimately laying the fragile groundwork for everything we have just talked about. That deep frustration is exactly why I finally decided to stop wishing and build it myself. It is called the 4 p.m. fix. It is a comprehensive, strictly structured, 21-day system designed exclusively to help you recognize, aggressively manage, and ultimately stabilize those dangerous afternoon blood pressure spikes before they are allowed to do permanent damage to your vessel walls. I want to be perfectly clear right now. This is not a stroke treatment. It is not a medical guarantee or a magic pill that prevents neurological emergencies. It is a highly focused, evidence-backed protocol exclusively for cardiovascular maintenance and daily blood pressure management. But unmanaged afternoon blood pressure spikes are exactly how the microscopic vessel damage we discussed earlier begins. It is the slow, grinding wear and tear that silently compromises your body's delicate plumbing over decades. The sheer number of people who find out about their wildly fluctuating afternoon blood pressure after a terrifying, life-altering health scare instead of before it happens is honestly what keeps me up at night. We are incredibly reactive when it comes to our cardiovascular health. We stubbornly wait for the blaring siren and the rush trip to the emergency room. The 4 p.m. fix is built from the ground up for the exact preventative blind spot where daily health management usually fails. It is not a quick fix or a trendy, baseless supplement routine. It is a demanding 3-week blueprint that actively targets the specific lifestyle, nutritional, and physiological triggers causing your blood pressure to secretly surge just when your body's circadian rhythm hits that vulnerable late afternoon slump. It actively bridges the critical gap between what you promise to do at the doctor's office and what you actually do in your living room every afternoon. Because I want to get this vital framework into as many hands as humanly possible right now, we are currently offering it at a significantly reduced introductory discount, but that early access pricing window is absolutely closing shortly as we finish rolling out the full community support features. I strongly encourage you to access the book via the description and pinned comments below while it is still fully available at this initial tier. Do not wait until your cardiovascular vessels have already been pushed to their absolute breaking point to start paying attention to your daily numbers. But let's get back to the urgent signals your brain is sending you right now. We have covered the subtle mirror glitch and the terrifying spatial reboot, but the next pre-warning sign on our essential list is perhaps the most deceptive of all. You are sitting on your comfortable couch, scrolling through your phone or watching television, when suddenly the screen splits. Without warning, you are looking at 2 overlapping, slightly offset versions of whatever is right in front of you. You blink hard, you rub your eyes, you adjust the brightness on your screen and tell yourself you have just been staring at a glowing rectangle for way too long. You decide you are simply overdue for a new eye exam, or maybe you are just getting the aura of a migraine. A couple of tense minutes pass, you blink one last time, and your vision snaps sharply back into perfect, singular focus. That is the reassurance. Blaming it on screen fatigue or needing a stronger prescription is the easiest, most comforting excuse in the world. But here is the terrifying reversal. Your eyes do not suddenly misalign themselves just because they are tired. That sudden double vision is a highly specific, urgent warning from your brainstem or the occipital lobe at the back of your head. The incredibly complex neurological network that meticulously coordinates your eye muscles requires a continuous, uninterrupted flow of oxygenated blood to keep both eyes moving in perfect, seamless unison. When a microscopic clot momentarily chokes off that specific vascular pathway, your eyes physically drift out of sync. It is a critical, glaring power failure in the visual district. If you experience this, your power grid is not just flickering quietly, it is violently throwing sparks. So what do you actually do when you finally recognize one of these silent alarms? The moment you experience the crooked mirror smile, the deadweight arm, the terrifying spatial reboot, or the split vision, your absolute first step is to rigidly document the timeline. Grab your phone, open the Notes app, or find a piece of paper and write down the exact time the symptom started and the exact time it resolved. When you are sitting in a chaotic triage room under immense stress, your memory will inevitably blur. Doctors need precise timestamps to determine which medical interventions are safe to use, because the window for administering certain life-saving, clot-busting medications is governed entirely by a strict, unforgiving clock. Next, absolutely do not attempt to self-treat. The most common, deeply tragic mistake people make in this pre-stroke window is deciding to take an aspirin, drink a glass of water, and go take a nap, desperately hoping they will feel better when they wake up. Sleeping through a neurological warning sign is the exact equivalent of turning off a screaming fire alarm and going back to bed while the kitchen is filling with smoke. If you go to sleep, you completely forfeit the tight golden window where emergency doctors can actually intervene. Instead, you need to get to an emergency room immediately and clearly tell the triage nurse that you believe you just experienced a transient ischemic attack or a mini stroke. Do not downplay it. Once you are evaluated, your doctor needs to run 3 specific categories of checks before you can safely assume you are out of the woods. First, you need a comprehensive vessel imaging check. This means looking directly at the major arteries in your neck to ensure there is no hidden plaque buildup choking the primary supply lines to your brain. Second, you need a long-term blood sugar check. We are not talking about a simple finger prick. We need to see your average glucose levels over the past few months, because chronically high blood sugar acts like microscopic sandpaper, silently shredding the delicate inner lining of your blood vessels and making them prime targets for sticky clots. Finally, you need a continuous heart rhythm check. A standard 10-second electrocardiogram in the hospital bed is simply not enough. You need to know if your heart is intermittently fluttering or misfiring throughout the day, quietly whipping up tiny blood clots and launching them straight into your upper bloodstream. And of course, if you already know that your cardiovascular numbers tend to dangerously creep up as the afternoon rolls around, creating the exact high-pressure environment that forces these tiny clots into your brain, that is exactly what the 4 p.m. fix was built to catch before it becomes something much worse. You can find that link in the description below. Let's go back to the grim reality we started with. The average person waits over 3 hours after their brain desperately screams for help before they say a single word to another human being. They sit in the heavy silence, rationalizing away the flickers, desperately hoping the power grid holds up. But that silence is not a grace period. It is a rapid, irreversible countdown. Your body is giving you a rare preview of a permanent catastrophe while you still have the power to change the ending. If you or someone you love has experienced any of the subtle signs we just covered, do not brush it off. Get it checked immediately. Please hit the subscribe button right now so we can keep bringing you the medical truths that actually save lives. A warning system only works if you finally decide to listen.